Welcome back to the New Brew podcast. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Natasha.
And we're back with episode 4. This time we're discussing fears that pre-service teachers may have when it comes to teaching Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander content.
Today with us, we have our curator, Dr. Sandy, who will do Acknowledgement of Country. So over to you, Dr. Sandy.
Welcome, everyone. So Fear to Teach, episode 4 already. I'm really looking forward to learning from you all. Dr. Sandy resides predominantly in the Dakingyung country. We would like to acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional owners of Australia. We acknowledge their continuing connection to land and water and pay our respects to elders, past, present and emerging. So I thought today my quote for the day, something that is not Aboriginal but is close to my heart, comes from Africa. So my brother-in-law is from Chad, and I've got 2 nephews and a little niece who have a mixed sort of feel about their love for Australia, love for London or England and Chad. And he always tells me about this quote from African, a proverb, and I really love it, and I think it resonates well with today. So if we want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I just think that's a really nice way to start for today.
Thank you for that, Dr. Sandy. So today we are welcoming a very special guest, an Aboriginal academic and researcher who will help in conquering some fears that pre-service teachers may have. Now, before we hear from our guest, this person made a huge impression on Natasha and myself in our first semester of being pre-service teachers. This guest also ignited our passion for Indigenous education, and when we signed up to do this podcast with Dr. Sandy, the first person we thought to interview was this guest without hesitation. It is our pleasure to introduce to you our guest, Karen Wallace.
Hi guys, thank you so much for allowing me to come and spend some time with you. So I am an Aboriginal educator and a researcher, but I'm also a mum and I'm a qualified primary teacher, and I also am a member of my local AECG and a regional representative. So I feel very privileged to be here today.
That's awesome. Now, the reason that we really wanted to interview you in our podcast is because of the knowledge and the insight that we believe that you can provide to us in terms of fears that pre-service teachers may have when it comes to teaching Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander content. So now to Kyle with the question.
So our first question would be, did you have any fears surrounding this topic early in your teaching career? And how did you overcome them as a pre-service teacher or even in-service teacher?
Look, as an Aboriginal teacher, I can see both sides of the story. So my first fear was I didn't know enough. And they're probably the same fears that every teacher has. I was too scared, I think, what if I offend somebody? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I use the wrong terminology? What if I get in trouble for using the wrong artifact, or if I'm not doing the right thing? So I think all of my fears, even as an Aboriginal person, because we're such a diverse population, are the same today as they were when I was before I went for my first prac. I think how I overcame that was, and I was very lucky, I had a lot of Aboriginal students in my cohort, so we often collaborated, connected together. We had these discussions. You'll find with Aboriginal teachers and pre-service teachers, we tend to have these discussions a lot. We call them yarns. We have a bit of a yarn about our fears before we go in. And and I think that's if you can collaborate together and talk through, and like Dr. Sandy always says, just admitting that this is a fear is probably the very first positive step forward. But yeah, I definitely had the same fears that you do.
Yeah. Now, you said you collaborated with some Indigenous people in your cohort. Now, what would some things that you'd be able to provide us that they actually expressed towards you? Like, is there any input that they said, like, that they could, like, obviously help you in your teaching? Like, is there anything that they provided to you that you could express or share with us?
Absolutely. I mean, and I just want to reassure you and all of your listeners that this subject is still, probably from my experience in being in schools and working with staff, still the number one fear is offending. We're so terrified of getting it wrong that we avoid it. So I think what my colleagues and peers and my Aboriginal, even my Aboriginal students who get together and have a chat with each other, it's really about what are we afraid of? Because if you look at the heart of this, you are actually respectful and you are more afraid to have a go out of fear of disrespecting. And I think that's a beautiful place to come from. I think what we did basically was, if we didn't have the knowledge or the understanding, we actually decided to reach out. Just admitting to ourselves, look, we don't actually know, but we're so willing to learn. And I think pre-service teachers already have that gift. As you come into the tertiary space,
Definitely.
you have this gift of, it doesn't matter what, I'm going to learn this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. So if they were to get stuck and they were to needing to reach out and they didn't have the knowledge or the support around them, where would they reach out to?
Yeah, really good question. So I've been having a little bit of a look at your lesson plan and the way that you've constructed this and the appropriate, I guess, method that you're following, which I'm really proud of. When you've got a school, particularly if we're talking about rural or regional, that's a very different context compared to urban and very different in terms of context to remote schooling. So if you are a pre-service teacher out on prac, the very first person that you would talk to is your prac teacher, your supervising teacher would have knowledge of, or should have knowledge of, an Aboriginal person within the school. If your school doesn't have an Aboriginal person within the school, then you would have a local AECG. That's the Aboriginal Education Consultative Group, and they're the I guess who the department looks to as someone who can provide advice for you guys. So they're the people that you would generally reach out to. And the AECG have a website, and you can go on there, and each school within New South Wales is linked to an AECG that you can reach out to.
Yeah, definitely, because I feel like that's definitely some of the fears in regards to pre-service teachers is it comes from a good heart and they do want to do the right things, but they're scared of getting it wrong. So, definitely. So on to our second question that we have for you, Karen, is how important would you say Indigenous Aboriginal education is for primary school teaching?
Yeah, I'm very passionate, which is probably why
That's why we're here.
Look, I'm so passionate, and I think, and I'll just be completely honest with you, my passion comes from really challenging that close the gap stuff. Why are we looking at this from a deficit viewpoint? And I think that comes from my own experience of understanding every single Aboriginal student that I've ever met has the ability and capacity to learn. So when we look at, instead of coming at Aboriginal education from this point of what they can't do, if I took any student and said, I'm going to look at what you haven't done, it's a very deficit model. So I always take my viewpoint from this child has every capacity to learn. My passion really comes from understanding that in today's world in Australia, because of the over 200 years of legislation that has impacted on our families, that unless we allow our children to become educated with Western ways, but also educating them and supporting them in their identity and their cultural identity, that gap does increase. So research now shows that if you get one Aboriginal student to graduate university, you've closed the gap for that child, and that creates a ripple effect. So how important is it for primary school teaching? Well, the partnership agreement tells us that some of the goals that we need to look towards in the future is that every Aboriginal child should be able to complete schooling with their academic outcomes better than their non-Aboriginal peers, but also to have a very confident cultural connection and cultural knowledge, a level of cultural knowledge upon graduating. So for me personally, that's huge. Yeah,
that's the end goal. That's the end goal.
That's the end goal, right?
But there's a lot of steps to get there.
So it starts in primary school, and Leicester's research shows that Indigenous kids will switch off mainstream school around stage 2.
Yeah.
So as teachers, you have such power, and I think it's our pre-service teachers that are non-Aboriginal, because you're the majority in our schools now. You have the passion and the fire and the absolute value of our culture, and I think it's this cohort that are going to go out and change and you're going to hit that target.
Yeah.
Because of your passion and that heart that just wants to do the right thing.
Yeah, and I still remember your tutorial, like pretty much what was the second tutorial you said it only takes one teacher
One.
Exactly.
It only
right.
takes one teacher, and that hits home for you. And I know that because you expressed it through your tutorials. Because you came from that low SES, you said, and
Yeah,
all that
absolutely.
type of stuff. And
Yeah.
it only takes one teacher to obviously spark that educational passion. I think it's passion, and it does come down to passion and engagement. And if the child's not engaged, it doesn't matter, Indigenous or non-Indigenous, they're not going to want to learn if they're not engaged.
Yeah.
So,
well, I was going to ask you, Kyle, what was it that sparked your fire to, chase supporting Indigenous students?
So I have two brothers who are Indigenous, and I never knew why they weren't like getting the grades and why they almost felt ostracized from the educational system. Like I'd seen them come home and they wouldn't understand it, and there'd be no support. They would reach out to their teachers, there'd be no support. And like my mum isn't Indigenous, but my father is, and he doesn't know his family. He doesn't know, like, he was a part of the lost generation, like the stolen generation. And he doesn't know what to do. So I feel like that sparked my passion in regards to Indigenous education, bridging that gap for all students in regards to learning. I feel, that's what sparked my passion. But I think Natasha as well, she obviously felt your passion and attached to that, and she's very much an empath. So she
Yeah. And look, me and Kyle have been together for quite a while. So, hearing the stories of his stepdad and, how he was adopted and, being there for his siblings, pretty much since they were born, it's, I've definitely been there to see all of the struggles. And then coming to your class, it really, it painted this whole picture for us. And, we just can't wait to finish. And we've got a plan. As soon as we finish, we're selling our cars and we're going to buy a big fancy car, and then we're going to go traveling. Like we can't wait. We're so excited. But the spark definitely comes from both you and Dr. Sandy. So we thank you for that.
Yeah, it's definitely, and you can see like us as adults as well. It doesn't take it only takes a couple of people around you to push you. It doesn't matter regardless whether you're a child or an adult. Like if you have supportive people around you, you want to make better. You want to make good.
It works both ways for me too, because it's a two-way street. So like that quote, if you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together.
Exactly.
And for me, when I tutor both of you, I want to tutor better. I want to be better at my job so I can better equip you the necessary skills. And then you inspire me and you teach me things all the time. So every tutorial I learn from people like you two. And I think that is what teaching is about, learning together.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so
that's so good.
Definitely hit a spot in our hearts, and we want to make better. And I feel like as all pre-service teachers, we have a good place in our heart, and we do want to make better. And don't be scared to try and make better. You'll gain that knowledge as you go.
Exactly.
And my motto is roll with the punches.
Oh, I love it.
like can't get through university without rolling to the punches. So
it's life.
Yeah, it's life.
And it's true because if you look at research, often people, I think the way to employ people is look at your enthusiasm, because skill sets can be taught. We can all learn things all the time, but it's your attitudes that you bring that is essential. And as far as I'm concerned, you two have attitude plus, HD plus, and that's key, because then you can learn the skills because you want to.
Yeah, so advice for all pre-service teachers out there, roll with the punches, reach out if you don't have the knowledge, and go for it.
And Kyle, I'd just like to say too, because just to back up what Dr. Sandy said there, when you talked about having that attitude, to me that's one of the most important, valuable things for a teacher of an Aboriginal student is your attitude. And we're trying to undo, over 200 years of wrong attitudes. And I think pre-service teachers, and you guys, particularly in my class, I noted very early on, were really open to having your mind and your values that you came with stretched, challenged, the bias that perhaps you've grown up with or come through with the education system. And I think that in itself, if we look at a teacher's attitude, it's hitting our kids and it's impacting them lifelong. So if you keep that fire and that humbleness to learn and to seek out other ways, I think that is exactly what teachers of Aboriginal students need, is just that valuing of a different way. And I think personally, what we're seeing is this disconnectedness from the stolen generations is now, we're really seeing this in the classrooms. And I think coming into any context, whether you're in rural or regional or even urban context, understanding that disconnectedness, some kids will come and they're just not culturally connected. And it's none of their fault. It's because of, years and years of that generational impact. So I think if you can keep an open mind, I mean, the Alice Springs Declaration, and the partnership agreement with the ACG really focuses on what that child's need is. If they're not culturally connected, what do they need to be culturally connected? And as a teacher, it's an attitude. It's if you can come with a value that these children have every right to their culture and that you are one of the people that are going to deliver that and support them in that, then I think, our pre-service teachers are the next generation of our powerful teachers. So yeah, keep that attitude, because I wish I could put that attitude into everything I find.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I think and I feel like it's definitely important, because if children see you as open and like willing to accept everybody, then that switches their mindset as well, because at the end of the day, all the children are in the playground together, they'll see you, and I feel like as a teacher, you're up the front and you set the example. That's how I see it. You set the example, and if you set an example for one child, it flows. So that was my thoughts. So over to you, Natasha.
Alrighty. So Kyle and I recently reached out to the community through Twitter, and we asked other pre-service teachers and in-service teachers what fears they might have when approaching the topic of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander content. So now we have some of those Twitter questions with us here today, and for the sake of privacy, we'll keep their names anonymous. Now, I'll get Kyle to start us off with the first question.
So the first one was the fears around using correct resources and whether they are authentic.
Yeah, that's a really tricky one in today's world, because we have policy and I'm sorry if I jumped in with the fears, because when I do professional learning with staff, all these fears that have come out are the same that I had at school and in
yeah, definitely.
And the fears, if you talk to any, even your supervising teacher, they will still have these fears. So
yeah, it's true.
It's very constant. So I'm sorry if I jumped in.
No, not at all. It's great.
So the fears around authenticity. Look, if you don't have a fear of that, there's something wrong, I think. I mean, if I went to teach any cultural background, whether it was, Japanese or Mandarin, or I would have a fear myself of, am I doing this authentically or am I doing it tokenistically? So that's not necessarily a bad fear. If it stops you from teaching it, then it's a bad fear. But when you go to do something authentically, it takes time and it takes relationships to be able to find authentic resources. And if we have a look at our history that's been captured primarily by European people, we're missing some of those stories. So if you can always get an Indigenous perspective or an Indigenous story, if you can collaborate and consult with an Indigenous person before you deliver that in the classroom, you'll always get to hear what's appropriate, what's sacred, what might be able to be shared. And I think it's that relational thing. So if you went to say, and this is just an example, but if you went onto a website, how do you know that's authentic?
Yeah,
how do we know if this is fact or if this is someone's fictional site? So it's really important that, okay, if you've got a website, say if you looked at Creative Spirits, which is a website, and I've been in contact with the owner of that site, some of these websites have popped up and there's all these resources on there, and some of those resources shouldn't have been shared. So if you can have an Indigenous person that you can speak to, that you trust, and that they know the local area, then that's the most relevant person to go to double check. Some schools actually have an Aboriginal worker or an SLSO that are employed in the school for this reason. So if that's the person that you need to go and consult with, then it's absolutely okay to say, look, this is a website, they've got an activity here or a resource. What do you think about this? So, yeah, that's what I would say. In terms of authenticity, we always like you to go to local first. So check out the local resources first and the local land councils and AECG to make sure that you can always get the local first. Now, and sometimes, because our history hasn't been recorded, that's really difficult. But if you definitely double check with an Aboriginal person in your local area, And that's why it's so important for teachers to reach out to our local community.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if this is valid, but I know I come from a before and after school care background, and we used to obviously have children from different races come into our service, and I used to reach out through their parents to come in and provide stuff. Is that something that you can do in regards to teaching, like reach out through children's to parents?
Absolutely. And you've done probably one of the first things that I would always encourage.
Wisdom again, Kyle. Wisdom always.
Because you seem to have a natural talent for this.
He does, doesn't he?
Yeah, look, what we need to, I really, this is why I'm doing my PhD. We need to start opening this box up. Our Indigenous families are interconnected, and we have been relocated for years and years and years, and we keep relocating, which means you might be in one area and you might have 5 or 6 different cultures, Aboriginal cultures within that area.
Yep.
So if you reach out to a parent, that parent may know their culture, they may not. But if they're going to be open to sharing with you, then definitely jump on board. But just make sure you don't have that expectation that if I do reach out, they're going to have, basket weaving to share with me, because they just may not. But yeah, definitely you might reach out to parents and see that, wow, I've got 4 different nations being represented just in my classroom. And I find that's beautiful. That's our diversity. Yeah, love it.
All right, on to you, Natasha, for the next question.
All right. So the next question is fears around providing misinformation. So if we were to provide the incorrect information, how would we go about fixing this?
Excellent question. Absolutely excellent question. And I think this generation is leading this. I talk to Aboriginal colleagues all the time, and the first thing we kind of do, a lot of us, is we admit when we're wrong. If we get it wrong, we're happy to say, look, I've done the wrong thing here. Can you help guide me on the right pathway? And I think pre-service teachers are really great at this. I know you two certainly ask me for guidance if you before you do ask. I think that if we could tell all of our teachers, if you don't know, ask. It's okay to not know. If there's an elder Aboriginal person coming to me, do I say auntie or uncle? I don't know. It's okay to ask. It's okay to say, should I call you auntie or an uncle? Is it okay if I call you that? And they'll be very honest with you. So I think if we can understand that there's a diversity here, and it's misinformation is out there on the web. Social media has been a great thing. But in terms of our Indigenous knowledges and our ownership of knowledge, social media has really opened up for some inappropriate plagiarism of our knowledges. Always, and that's why it's very important. During university, you'll go through, particularly at UON, and there's other universities are jumping on board now, some compulsory courses around Aboriginal cultural awareness. And universities are preliminary. Sorry, my voice is going.
Oh, that's
primarily universities are primarily where you get your cultural awareness from. So you'll do a compulsory course, and they will teach you how to look for the right information and where to get it from.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that wraps around to our next question as well. Fears around appropriate terminology when naming Indigenous Australian people.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one, and I could be very politically correct, or I could be very honest.
Honesty is the best policy.
It's very difficult. In some areas that have been recorded well, you'll know exactly where the nation's lines are and where the boundaries are on the map. When we even look at the Australian map, currently it was recorded by a non-Aboriginal person. So a lot of our history is still being uncovered, which makes it very difficult. So when we see, okay, this country is mine, that country is yours, here's the line, here's the boundary between our languages, all of this history is still just being researched. So, I know of a school who they were for years, the last 20 years of being known on one country, and just in the last month have been labelled as a different country, being on a different country because the history has now come forward. So,
wow.
Yeah, so we're still in the baby steps of bringing Aboriginal history and culture into the forefront of being valued on that level.
Well, I'm learning a lot.
Yeah, and that's
one of the biggest. To you, Karen.
That's one of the biggest things. Like, a lot of people don't realise, but this it's happened recently. Like it's only happened in the last 233 years. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'll find some people are using a language that's built, and we go back to that stolen generations, Kyle, where there was so much relocation and so much cultural disconnection, and people lost their language and their family name, that even now people are coming forward. You might find teachers, you might find students who are suddenly, oh, my great-great-grandfather I've just found out he's Aboriginal.
100%.
And so they're on this incredible journey of finding out their family history. And so it can be really tricky. So as a pre-service teacher, just keep your mind open to learning. Take in the information, file it away. If you're in doubt in terms of which country to use, always go with what the school is using, because the schools in New South Wales generally have double check with their AECG about what language to use and what terminology to use. So always go back to your supervising teacher, double check with them. If they don't know, they will definitely double check with the AECG. I would recommend, and I always have, my pre-service teachers, I get them to join the AECG as soon as they can. It costs $2 for an Aboriginal person. It costs $2 for a non-Aboriginal person.
Yeah.
So,
already done. Last semester done that.
Yeah, well done, Carl. Yeah, and you can go along to those meetings and just ask those questions like, I'm new to this. What do I do with this language, or how do I use this? And that's where you'll find the connections that you need and the knowledge you need.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Now over to Dr. Sandy for her pearls.
So, Karen, we do Pearls of Wisdom each episode. I'm not sure I could offer many Pearls of Wisdom with this one, but I have been thinking as Karen talks, and I would flag, I think, these 3 steps, because I think people want to support this. And I actually don't. I rarely meet a pre-service teacher that is not interested. So the first thing would be building awareness. I think that's really important. So have a look and think, how can I build awareness? Where can I go to find building awareness? And then the next steps going through would be forming our partnerships, without a doubt. So the AECG, for example, sounds like all the things like Karen's been saying. I could listen to this podcast again and again, I think, because I learn stuff every day. And then I think this is really important, to be systematic. So, and I think that's an area to move forward, so we can understand what is working and where we can keep on moving forward. Because I agree with 100% with Karen. And it's my other point I would say is I come with an inclusion lens as well. And it took me a while to get my head around it, I'll be honest. So I think when I first started my PhD, I had a deficit lens because that's how I was taught. So, and it was not until I started working as a tutor with people like Stuart Woodcock, and I started really talking to him about, what do you mean by a deficit lens? What do you mean by inclusion lens? And it was like an epiphany moment one day, and I went, I've got it. And it's as simple as, and I always say this to people, start with people's strengths. It's as simple as that. So people go, well, what's inclusion? It's complicated. No, it's not. Start with strengths and move forward. So, and a real strength is, I think, things like, I thought I'd mention this example for you, case studies that are coming around that we are seeing that are strengths. So there was one that I wanted to mention at Kempsey South Public School, regional, because I thought of you too. And they're working very hard at a transitional program to support the movement from home, early childhood into the primary school. And that is an area that is awesome that they're succeeding in. So you can actually have a look at, for example, the school website to get an idea, but look for their successes. So start with their successes, because that's key. And go back and listen to this podcast again. I think I will. I will be, because Karen and I we have become friends. I'm really fortunate to call her friend, and I learned so much from her. And that's, for me, it's just a wonderful, wonderful dynamic to have, where you know that, because I will tell her things. Karen, won't I? I was like, Karen, I don't know. I'm sorry. Come and tell me what to do. So, because I don't identify as Indigenous, and I want to be respectful. I still have the same worries that you guys have said on Twitter and so on. So I go to my trusted source, and she happens to be on this podcast today.
Look, I don't know everything, and I have to be honest. One Aboriginal person on behalf of everyone. And I'm still learning myself. So there's things that I don't know, and I make mistakes so many times, and I have to go to my elders and say, oh, I've made another mistake. And I think if you always keep that humbleness to go, well, I don't know everything, I'm not the expert, and you know what, if we all learn together, our country's going to change. And that's my philosophy. Is reconciliation for me is not about one person going forward and the next person following. It's we walk side by side, and Aboriginal people fall over too. And if we keep falling over and we keep picking each other up and just keep taking another step, we're going to get there. And I think we don't get angry at each other for falling over and making a mistake. If we can pick each other up and go, you know what, let's do this together, I think that's how our children will benefit.
The whole idea of heal country, to me, that is so inclusive oriented. The whole idea we'll heal together. So, and for me, I found that so inspiring to think. To me, that gives me the confidence to step up as well and be more public with things. And yeah, you're right. I do have other friends who are Indigenous who I talk to as well. But it's a journey. But it's a journey we can't not do. It's a journey we have to do, and we must push into it and keep pushing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like picking people up instead of putting people down will obviously inspire that passion and won't deplete it. And if someone's like, oh, you did that wrong, yada 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 yada, this, then they're less likely to obviously want to go into that realm and go into that topic. So yeah, that's
the deficit. That's what we mean by the deficit way of thinking. So, and I hear it in your voice anyway, Kyle. So you I think have come to university with this mindset anyway, but other people don't. So we have to be gentle in tutorials and help people to learn that way of automatically thinking. So,
So thank you so much, Karen, for joining us this episode today and providing us the essential knowledge when approaching the topic of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander content. Now, it's the New Brew podcast tradition to end our episodes with one last question. If someone gave you $1 million, how would you change teaching? So you can either choose teaching in general as a whole or in regards to the topic of Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander content.
And for pre-service teachers in particular.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, look, my answer to you might disappoint you because I don't really need $1 million. I just need 1 million pre-service teachers out there.
Oh, I like that one.
You guys are going to change. You are the changers. I mean, most of the pre-service teachers I've taught in my time are now leading their Aboriginal education teams with passion, and I can see you two doing that. And most of the pre-service teachers that come in that I work with who catch this fire, they go into their schools and they set their school on fire, and not literally, but suddenly this value comes out and they're changing things. And if we could have every pre-service teacher out there leading with this passion and this new knowledge, and I think that's something that we're missing, is that there weren't compulsory Aboriginal courses at university. And so a lot of our teachers that are out there in schools now have this chunk of history and culture and the value and the fire missing. And you have that. You're going out there. So you're going to be game changers. And that's my personal belief, is that if you're it, tag.
It's tag. I like it. Yep, tag. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that might disappoint, but I think how much is the fire of valuing Aboriginal culture? I think that's worth more than $1 million to me, because it saves lives.
Definitely.
So true. And to be honest, I think a lot of things don't cost as much as what people think.
No, compassion, understanding, opening your mind to seeing that, wow, I am so surprised sometimes about my own bias, because I'll have a child come to me and say, this is how my mummy does things. She doesn't do it the way you do. And I reflect and go, I've not listened, and it really helps me understand our children are coming to us with this incredible knowledge about connecting to country, the stories that they're learning and the lessons they're learning from country. And I think if we can open our minds and hearts to let ourselves go a bit and listen, our country has so much to teach us if we just stop and listen. And I think that's something that I'm learning myself as we go along. So yeah, that's kind of my answer to the million.
Well, all of those things are priceless.
Yeah. Exactly.
Great question, though.
Alrighty, now over to you, Dr. Sandy, for your words of encouragement for this episode.
Sure. So we like to end with a good positive note because that's the way we like to roll here. So in episode 1, we talked about that notion of intelligence before emotion to help us function well in the classroom on prac. Dive-in mentality, which is pretty much what we've been talking about today. That was our second one. Teamwork matters was for the one when we talked about technology with Jared. Today, I've been tossing and turning, actually, even during the conversation, because I kept thinking, I could think of a better one, because there were so many great catchphrases that was said during the podcast. I normally say giving, getting back, because for me, that makes sense, that going back to the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go to far, go together. I'm going to change it. I'm going to change it today after something that Karen said, keep an open mind.
Definitely.
That's really the way I think. So hashtag keep an open mind.
I love that.
So just tell us a bit about your page, because I'm not sure people realise, or I'll actually just tell a little bit. Karen and other people are helping on each page. So even though Tash and Kyle are doing a video diary of their first lesson plan, they're not on their own. They're actually going to people for advice and help. So when you go on to our website, and it's at this stage $10 a month, you'll actually see the journey from your point of view if you're a pre-service teacher, but you'll also see the journey with people who can help. So, for example, last week we had technology, and we had Andrew come on. And so with Karen, we had Karen with gender. And Karen's kindly come back because she's our go-to for Indigenous. So there'll be other people, there'll be other sources there guiding and supporting success with lesson plans. And that's the thing. I think it's really easy to have all your coursework, but it's the lesson plans and actually doing it is hard part. And one of our visions is to show you the journey of lesson plans. So Tash and Kyle, what else are you offering in your page?
So obviously we have the free resources available for parents at home and anybody else teaching online. And we also have resources available for those who are part of our subscription. Now, this is where the gold is. We're offering pre-service teachers the process with step-by-step videos on how to create the lesson plan, which is inclusive of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. Now, if you're looking at our free resources, we've created other little activities that parents can do at home. But like I said, as part of our subscription, that's where we are targeting the pre-service teachers and providing you with the step-by-step process on creating that lesson plan.
Yeah, definitely. And with our subscription and stuff, we're showing you the process that, like Karen said, reaching out. You can reach out, and this would show the process of reaching out and noting down knowledge, and obviously that step-by-step, that it's not an overnight thing. You need to reach out, you need to gain the knowledge, and you need to create that lesson plan based on reaching out and gaining that essential knowledge. You can't just all of a sudden just look up a website and go, this will do, that's perfect, I'm gonna put that out for my class. You need to reach out, you need to gain that knowledge, and that's one of the things I've definitely learned through this process in our subscription page. Yeah, because
that's so insightful, because honestly, people will go home and they'll think, oh, quick, I've got to do a lesson plan for tomorrow. You need to go to your teacher, your classroom teacher, and say, okay, wait a minute. We need to take a step back here. I need to have time to do this lesson well. So, and I think that's a reasonable thing to say to your classroom teacher, and talk to them and explain to them, this is why. So, and I would be surprised if they said no to that, actually. And I think they would embrace that, and they will learn from it too. And part of it is we all want to learn. Okay.
Exactly.
Definitely.
And we only do what we know at a time until we know better. So then we change. And that's my whole motto in life is I'll do what I'm doing until I learn more, and then I keep on refining myself and reinventing myself, I often say to people, because I'm trying to work things out. So anything else that you would like to share with this?
So just when you were doing it, it's better to not rush it. When creating a lesson plan, like we said, it's better to not rush it. It's better to take the time and do it properly. So then obviously your students will gain the most knowledge out of it. You don't want to rush things.
Exactly. Alrighty. Now, if you're looking to connect with us, make sure to keep up with our socials. Our Twitter is @NatashaKyle_TNB, and our Instagram is also @NatashaKyle_TNB. And if you want to find all of this educational content, our website is www.thenewbrewpc.com. Thanks for tuning into this episode, and never forget, hashtag
Dive in
Dive in
mentality.
mentality.
Thanks, guys.